Welcome to The Engine Room, the podcast where we explore the trends, insights, and ideas shaping the future of B2B marketing. I'm your host, Laura Pearsall. I'm the head of sales marketing here at Prime Creative Media, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Christine Clancy, our CEO. Hello, Christine.
Hello, Laura. It's great to be here again.
Good to have you back after a little break. We had our head of IT last time, but now you're back. You've been traveling for work.
I have. Yeah, pretty exciting. Yeah, we just acquired a few titles over in the UK, so I was over there welcoming that team, which was very cool.
There is never a dull moment here. There is often an acquisition on the go, but that's how we love it. We love being busy.
Yeah, we love it. And they were very excited to hear about the lead generation we're going to be able to bring to them. So it ties very well into what we're talking about today.
Absolutely. Beautiful segue, Christine.
Yes, thank you.
Today, we are talking lead generation. It is a topic that most marketers are dealing with day in, day out. Let's be honest, if you're a marketer, one of your top KPIs is probably going to be lead generation.
It's leads. I mean, like, it's nice to have branding. It's nice to get your stories out there.
They're very important.
Yes, they're very important. But I mean, the reason that you're doing that is so that your sales team have these leads, these warm leads, so that when they're calling people up, people have already heard of their products, or ideally people are calling them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we wanted to do today in this conversation is actually start at the top with a bit of a definition of what lead generation is. But we actually kind of thought the better place to even start was what lead generation isn't.
Absolutely.
Because I think in this day and age, we know lead generation is really important. So I think a lot of people can get sidetracked with sort of just getting bulk leads at any cost, trying to filter in multiple leads to sales teams.
Yeah.
And look, even in a B2C environment, that's not going to work, but particularly in B2B, it's not the way to go about
Absolutely. To hear clients say, oh, I can buy this many leads. I can just go to this company and they'll sell me X amount of leads for a few $100s. Sorry, that's not really lead generation. That's do you really want your marketing and your lead in the hands of a call center, that doesn't know you? Or is it just scraping the internet for a list of email addresses? So just to be clear, there are a lot of companies and they'll say, oh, this is great lead generation. It's not real generation. They're not qualified leads. They're not marketing qualified leads. And that's what you want as a marketing team. You're delivering marketing qualified leads, sales qualified leads, people who know about your product, are interested in it, have expressed an interest, have said, yep, I'd love for you to call me, or I'm actually close on the buying cycle. That's the kind of lead generation, the quality lead generation that we're going to talk about today.
Absolutely. So straight from the top, we are talking about people that are genuinely interested in products. We are not talking about information that's been scraped from the internet. It is people that have shown, I think a word that's really important here is people that have shown intent.
Yes.
An intent and an interest. So where we thought a sensible place to start was actually to look at some of the different ways that B2B companies can do lead generation these days. And then actually from there work through, I guess, some of the principles and why lead generation continues to be really, really important in a B2B environment.
Yeah.
So I thought I'd start at the top with a really obvious example of lead generation. It's one that we've likely all seen before. Using a resource download, something like a white paper or an ebook, to actually capture an audience's attention and get them to opt in to learn a little bit more about a particular product or service. Where we actually see it done really well is when we have a resource download that is about maybe a pain point in an industry or about a problem that your target customer is actually looking to solve. So we do that quite a lot here.
Yeah.
What are some examples where you've seen it work really well, or some of the white papers that you've really liked that have sort of gone past your desk?
Yeah, so I think in terms of white paper, most importantly, you want to start with like the relevance of the audience. So you think about, okay, I'm a decision maker, I'm a CEO. What are some challenges I might have? I might have some challenges on the IT side. I'm using too many programs. So I might get an email with a white paper that says, are you using too many programs? 5 simple steps to make decisions on what programs to use. Something like that for me. Firstly, it's really effective in terms of like, this is going to be a quick read. You don't want anything like too intense. Sometimes, certainly in the engineering side of things, you might get into more technical white papers, but something really catchy. It has to say immediately the value that it's going to give to me. What you don't want as a resource download, we've seen people do it and they're like, oh, we'll just distribute our flyers. Look, our flyers, that's far down the line. You want something that even if they don't know about your product, they want to read this white paper because it's going to give them some value. It's going to help them in terms of, me as the decision maker. It's something that's going to help me do a better job.
Yep. And there's a reason that we wanted to talk about resource downloads first, and that is because that is the kind of activity, though the kind of leads that you can generate through a white paper are really at the top of the funnel.
Yeah.
So it's people, they're probably aware that they have a problem.
Yeah.
They've got an issue that they need to solve. That's the kind of content that we want to be looking to include in these kinds of white papers. So we at Prime Creative Media, we often see clients that will do a custom white paper. They're exclusively talking about an issue or a problem that they are able to solve. We also see a lot where we actually create our own white papers in ebooks, and then we have multiple clients come in and sponsor different chapters.
Yeah.
And that's a really great way to, I suppose, look at a number of different issues. But I think to generate those, as we said before, marketing qualified leads, but marketing qualified leads that have intent across, I guess, an editorial topic that can sort of capture that broader level of interest, which does speak to that top of the funnel activity.
Yeah.
We do a lot of those here, and they tend to perform really well.
They're really well. And I'll give a good example. So say, for instance, you're someone and you're selling microphones to podcast rooms, and there might be an ebook, and it might be about how to set up, 5 great fundamentals to setting up a great podcast room. And then you might take part as the exclusive microphone supplier to that. You're not really just talking about your microphones. You're talking about these are all the things you want to look for in selecting a microphone for your podcast room. And oh, by the way, this just happens to be our company that can provide that. There might be an exclusive furniture supplier who, again, will give really valuable content. These are the things you want to think about in setting up your podcast room: the colors, the style, the comfort. And oh, by the way, we just happen to provide this. You might be a plant supplier, and these are all the things you want to think about. Even screen suppliers. So you can see how valuable that is. There's value to the reader. That's so important. There's me for the reader. I'm setting up my podcast room. I've got all these great resources now that's going to help me, all this great information. And these companies, I know you've got that goodwill because you gave me this information, and you've got that goodwill, and you've got one step ahead of all the other microphone suppliers. And when I download that, oh, by the way, now my information as a lead gets delivered to you as a company. And isn't it great for your sales team to be able to call these 20, 30 people who downloaded that ebook and say, hey, I hear you might be looking for microphones. Can we help you out? Like, what a great thing for a marketing team to do to really set up your sales team for success.
I think as well, the great thing about that example is the chain of supply as well, because we know in business, when you're solving a problem, it's not always one product or service that's going to actually solve the problem. Sometimes there is a chain that needs to be enacted.
Yeah, very good point. Yeah.
And the ebook is a great way to do it. You're actually able to partner with like-minded suppliers and solve a problem in whole.
Yeah. But one thing we do advise, make sure if you're taking part with a group of other suppliers, ask for exclusivity on your product. This is something you're allowed to ask for, to say, okay, if I'm going to be the microphone supplier, I do want exclusivity on that.
Yep. Yeah, that's pretty basic, and that's absolutely something that we always make sure that we enforce on our side as well. All right, now I wanted to look at another example of lead generation. Now this is one, if we were to think about our marketing funnel, now let's move down to the middle of the funnel. You're looking to generate some leads. Maybe they're problem aware. Now they're starting to think about the solutions that they're going to employ to actually solve that problem.
Yeah.
And webinars are such a great example of how you can actually do this.
Yeah.
From a lead generation perspective, they really perform extremely well in terms of the number of people that we can get opting in to attend these webinars and then actually attending and learning. And for a client, there's such a great opportunity to actually really dive down into a little bit more of the detail. So when we spoke about with a resource download, you're obviously looking at things like, some more general information, speaking about solving a problem. Now's the time where you can actually start to get into your product or service in a little bit more detail and how it solves the problem.
I absolutely love a webinar because it's so valuable for the people who attend. It's often free professional development. They get to go in, they get to sign up. They can do it from the comfort of their offices or their homes, wherever they're working from, and then get to learn, wow, like these are all these great tips. Again, if we're talking here about a podcast room, on all the ways things that I should be considering. So you're giving so much valuable for the reader. And again, that goodwill in terms of the people who are attending the webinar. And guess what? Not only have they received the information, you've got their contact details, but you've actually had an opportunity to interact. They've met you, like people from your team. And I think in these days these days, like that trust, that personal relationships, like it's so much more important. So when you've had a potential client actually see your experts from your team talk about, give them valuable information for them, but also talk about their product, what a great position you're setting your sales team up to be in, then to then follow up afterwards and say, hey, we see you attended this webinar. Would you be interested in another meeting? Like you're really setting your sales team up there.
Absolutely. And I think the point that you made about the fact that you can join online, you can also watch when you want to watch as well with webinars these days, which is really important. They're really valuable for an attendee, but they can be viewed at a time that's really convenient for the attendee as well, which is really handy. And I think an interesting thing that's sort of starting to happen over the last couple of years, we've been doing webinars for quite a while now, I think AI is really starting to change them as well. So nowadays, when you register for a webinar, the reality is not everyone will always attend a webinar that they've signed up for. You still generate that lead, you still have their details, but the way that a registrant can actually interact with the information is different as a result of AI. But as the client and as the company presenting your information, you still have a great opportunity to deliver it to someone who has shown they're interested. And they have the opportunity to consume, maybe use some AI to kind of pull out the most interesting parts, the most relevant parts about that product or service for them. And then take that next step, which might be a follow-up demonstration, a face-to-face meeting, that kind of thing. So webinars are definitely changing. It's not, we've been doing them for a while. AI is absolutely sort of impacting the way that they're being delivered as well.
Another good tip when looking for a webinar, if you are in, something like accounting or finance, a lot of webinars, you can link up with providers who actually will provide CPD points. So in some ways, imagine not only are you delivering, you're generating leads for your sales team, the people who are attending, they almost have to attend to get their CPD points. And that's such a win-win really on both sides. And you're delivering, really good CPD. So if you are in one of those in some, something where CPD is mandatory, do have a look, because there's a lot of companies, we certainly do it, that will also associate CPD. And it's just about, you'll give a quiz after the webinar, or you'll just have some kind of evidence that they attended, and then you're able to give a CPD certificate afterwards.
That's such a great point. I'm really glad you brought that up, because we know in certain industries they are mandatory, they need to be done. So this is a great way for people to actually tick that off and get them interested in your webinar. Now, if we keep moving down the funnel to another lead generating activity that we see a lot of, I wanted to talk about roundtables. So, Christine, I know you love a roundtable. We've both participated in them, both as hosts and as invited guests for roundtables. I think they're really important. We've spoken about how some of the other different examples help, resource downloads really help build awareness. A webinar really helps establish trust. A roundtable is really all about relationships, which we know is one of our fundamentals of B2B marketing. Maybe talk through an example that you've been at as actually as a CEO at a roundtable, and where you've benefited from all being together in the room and sharing and learning from each other.
It's so fantastic. There was an event we just even attended a few weeks ago, and it was so wonderful. Again, just sitting around a table. We had a host who was selling a service. They were selling a consultancy service, but then all of us around the circle learning from each other as CEOs. It was just so valuable in terms of the tips that we got up, that kind of peer tips. But also there was and you can do this where you have one of our editors, like kind of a celebrity. And in these cases, they had like kind of top level coach who hosted it. And it really elevates that brand. And it makes you want to go, because you're like, wow, I've got access to this, really like high level, chairperson. So make sure if you're going to do a roundtable, you do want someone who's a bit well known. Again, this is where a magazine editor is a really good person to have to host the roundtable, because everyone kind of wants to come, just have access to them. But then you end up getting so much from your peers, and then you end up discussing like all those issues, and then you can see the value that you're getting from that. You can see the value you're getting. You've got your sponsor there as well, and again, you're just creating such goodwill with that sponsor. Now, I think one thing that's important, don't ever jump straight to a roundtable. Roundtables can be very tempting in terms of like, oh, it's great. Of course, I want to host a thing where all these, decision makers, and I can get them sitting around the room. I would have never attended that had I not really known this company well ahead of time. I would have never. I get a lot of emails cold, please come to our roundtable. And I'm like, the truth is, if I haven't heard of the company, I'm not going to give up that much of my time to attend. So I think roundtables are really fantastic, like you said, bottom of the funnel, but make sure you've done a lot of brand awareness beforehand, or you're just not going to get people around that table.
Absolutely. There needs to be an initial relationship between the brand and the potential attendee / potential customer beforehand.
Yeah.
And I think another really important point to make about roundtables is this is not, obviously, it's not a volume game.
Yeah.
We're not running a roundtable to get 50 leads. We're not even doing it to get 20 leads.
Yeah.
We're doing it to get 8 to 10
Yes.
really high quality leads.
Yeah.
And really what this is actually about is close of purchase. It is getting us across
it's people
the
who are
line.
right at the end, right, just thinking, they know your brand, they've thought about it, they maybe agreed to attend because they've read a few roundtables or some case studies. They've been thinking, and only at that point will you probably get someone to that roundtable. But again, if you've done all the work, to get them there, it is so valuable.
Yeah, fantastic. All right. So as I said, we wanted to start by talking a little bit about different ways of doing lead generation. And then where I wanted to take this episode now is actually just looking at lead generation, I suppose a little bit more generally, and understanding why it's still so important and so critical in B2B marketing. So we've got some points up on screen. So for those of you who are watching on YouTube, you'll be able to see them on screen. And if you're listening on audio, not to worry, we're going to take you through them and we'll share this as a slide after the presentation in the show notes. But the first point we wanted to talk about is the fact that lead generation still is so important in B2B marketing because pipeline growth is a core business need.
Yep.
Now, what we're talking about here really relates back to one of our fundamentals, which is the fact that the sales cycle is long. We know it's up to 12 months. It's up to 12 months time. We also know that as a B2B seller, you need to have people at every stage of the pipeline. So problem aware, considering, being educated. You really need to have people constantly coming into that pipeline. And lead generation is one of the best ways to do it, isn't it?
It's so great. Again, it's got to form part of that bigger campaign, because what we see sometimes is people come in and they say, I've got 3 months to make these sales. What can we do in 3 months? How many leads can you generate for me in 3 months? It's like, it's not quite so simple. These are people, again, they're selling equipment. Sometimes it's tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. I used the examples of microphones before. That's not really B2B selling. In B2B selling, we're talking about trucks, we're talking about conveyors, really expensive equipment. These are things you can't just go out on a blitz and sell a lot in 3 months, because people are making these decisions. They're taking 1 year, 18 months to decide these things. But you do want to catch them. The influence you do have in helping that decision is actually that lead generation part. This is the one point, you can educate them throughout, but lead generation allows you that little bit of influence. You get their details, your sales team can call them up and hopefully maybe push that decision a little bit quicker.
Absolutely. And look, realistically, the best time to start a lead generation campaign was probably 12 months ago. But the second best time is tomorrow.
Yes.
Get it going.
Like the tree, right? You plant the tree.
Yeah. Exactly. Start getting the leads into the pipeline. They will flow from there. And I think your example that you spoke to of, I just need to generate as many leads as I can in 3 months, probably not quite the right approach.
No.
It's an ongoing thing, and you need to have, and again, comes back to a fundamental. You need to have different people at different stages of the pipeline so that you've constantly got people closing. That's what we really want for our sales teams.
ABC, always be closing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's what we want as B2B marketers for our sales team.
Yeah.
It's, those leads that are constantly ready to drop and at different stages.
Yeah.
The next point we wanted to talk about is just the fact that really good opportunities come from reaching buyers who are already in research mode. So not interrupting disengaged audiences. And what we're really talking about here is to be connecting with your target audience in a forum where they're already thinking about work.
Yeah.
So I think this is, what we're speaking to here a little bit is, obviously in B2B, we see a lot of people running lead generation campaigns on different platforms. So, it might be on Google Ads, you might be running it on Facebook, all of that, like other platforms like that are really more of a consumer space.
Yeah, it's just the wrong space, I think. And this is where you got to be careful. It's not a numbers game. If you're just, want the most number of clicks and page views, you can just pay for that. But the thing is, are they people who are actually, and you're like, yeah, I'm a marketer. I got 100 leads, from my Facebook campaign.
Job done.
Done, great. And then what's your sales team going to do? these are useless leads.
Yeah.
And that's just what a waste of money. What we want is we want those, like you said, those engaged audiences, people who are actively researching. So you want to make sure you're doing this lead generation, people who are researching. Where do people research? They tend to do it in trade media a lot of the times, actually.
Absolutely. That really goes into our next point. You know, generic digital channels, they're getting harder for that really high quality lead generation. The specialty media environment is key. And, you know, I've been sort of banging on about this all year, and I will continue to do that.
Yeah.
Our research survey that we conducted at the end of last year, our readers told us they do come to us to research new products and services.
Yeah.
It's the perfect environment to then actually be generating leads. They've told us straight out that's what they're here for.
Yeah. Well, like when I go on LinkedIn, I'm not there necessarily to buy new products and services. I'm often there to promote my own brand. And you know what's really frustrating when you're in an environment where you want to promote your own brand and you're just getting sold to. That gets really frustrating. But you know what people aren't doing when they're coming to trade media? They're there to research things that they can buy, things that they can consume. And so you're not competing with that. Oh my God, stop showing me these ads. Like I just want to post this thing about my company.
Yep.
You're in an environment where people are there. They're actively looking to buy things. What a perfect way to do the place to do lead generation.
They're in research mode.
Yeah.
And we do know that research mode is really, it's often happening before people are even problem aware, before they're even researching their products that they actually want to utilize. Research mode is happening in the background. So get in there and take advantage of that opportunity that these platforms provide. All right, next. Lead quality is more important than volume and is tied to buyer intent, trust, and context. So we've really kind of been speaking about this throughout the episode, I would say.
Yeah.
But, you know, in B2B, we are really, it's not about the highest numbers. It is about the highest quality of leads and making sure that the leads that you are generating, you might pay a little bit more for your leads in this kind of environment when you are running a lead generation program. But what you can take away from that is the fact that the leads you generated actually are tied to buyer intent.
Yes.
They have that trust. It's in a contextual environment. They're in the right place to be learning about these things. These are the people that you want to be connecting with.
Yeah, and you know, don't believe us. Like, go ask your sales team how good the quality of their leads are. I think that's really important. If you're a leader of an organization or a leader of a marketing team, make sure you're talking to your sales team and you're asking them, how is the quality of the leads? You know, this person reported to me they gave you 50 leads. What was the quality like? How many? And you don't necessarily want to say, okay, sales from the leads. Of course, that's important. That is a sales manager's job to track that, but it is your job as head of marketing to make sure you're delivering quality leads to the sales team.
Absolutely. And even just doing something as simple as looking at, like, filter the email addresses that are coming in.
And have a look and say, oh, like, are these good or not?
You know, if it's a generic email address, no, it's not a lead.
Or
it's
if your
not a lead.
or if your sales team is calling people up, they're like, sorry, I never heard of this company and hung up. Like, again, that's not a lead. But that's unfortunately, that's what we see when people go to these more generic digital channels. Is just not quality leads. Like the volume seems okay. Again, people ticking it off, but they're just not quality.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's pretty easy for us to say, and we would all agree, you know, quality over quantity.
Yeah.
Sometimes when it comes to action, like, you know, we can get a little bit sidetracked by looking for those high numbers. But I think as long as we come back to, and particularly in a B2B environment, if we get one lead that then goes on to actually purchase the $1 million piece of machinery,
that's you.
Happy days.
Well done, everyone. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah,
Give
money well
pat on the
spent.
back.
Like even if that, and the truth is, you'll get a lot more than one lead.
Absolutely
but even
you will.
throughout your 20, 30 leads, often you do just need one or two of those sales. So don't get too caught up on those numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, the next point, you touched on this a little bit before, Christine, but brand building improves lead generation performance rather than competing with it.
Yeah.
So, look, I think I'll start with this one with a common mistake that we see people make, which is, you know, they'll look through one of our media kits as an example and they go straight to the lead generation page and think, oh, this looks amazing.
I'll just do that.
I'll just have one of those,
Yeah.
please. I won't do any of the brand building. I won't establish any awareness or trust, or I won't do any education of the audience beforehand. But we know firsthand that is it just doesn't work, does it?
Yeah, and this is where, you know, if you're a head of marketing, you'll go to your sales team and your sales team will be calling up leads and people will be like, I've never heard of your company. And they will just hang up, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So you really that brand building, making sure people are really aware of your brand through brand recognition, display advertising, content. It is critical. I would say don't even do lead generation if you haven't done that foundational work. It's seriously that if you have a limited amount of money, I would actually just do the brand building, because this is what you want. You want your sales team calling people up, and you want to ensure that people know of your company, and that's through brand building.
Yeah, and B2B marketing is about laying the foundations, and then we can move through the layers of doing some different things, doing some things that are a little bit more innovative, a little bit more advanced. We can start doing things like, I don't know, maybe sponsoring a podcast or creating a fantastic video. But if you don't have that foundation of awareness and a strong brand, your lead generation is not going to go anywhere. And as much as we say lead generation in B2B is not a numbers game, ultimately we want to generate as many leads for you as possible. We want to we need those to be marketing qualified. Yeah. But the best way that we can generate that higher volume of marketing qualified leads is through that strong awareness and branding to begin with.
You have to do the groundwork. There's just unfortunately there's no shortcuts in that. There's no magic lead generation machine that will just make everyone want to buy it.
Exactly. No shortcuts in life. Yeah. All right. And that really, I think that our final point here really just drives that home. The most effective campaigns educate first, establish that credibility, and then capture demand.
Yes.
These are fundamentals of B2B marketing. We spoke about them a lot in our fundamentals episode. But I think the thing that we're seeing more and more, and I think the thing that we're really seeing in this, real AI-driven environment, the importance of the trust and the credibility.
Yes, because people are cautious now. Like if I just get a cold text email, I will not even read it. I will just delete. I assume it's a robot and not a real person who sent it to me. I think I even had once someone say like, please, like, will you just respond and tell me yes or no? I was like, oh, didn't know you were a real person, but sorry, no.
Yeah.
So you actually want to educate me to like come across your products. I've read about them. I've heard about them. I've seen the branding. So again, when you finally call me up, I've heard about you, and you can't do that without that education.
100%. All right, let's round out our conversation on lead generation and just sort of sum up with some key takeaways that we'd love our audience to go away with from today. Christine, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? What's one key takeaway that you'd love our listeners to leave today's episode with?
I guess just remembering it is no magic pill. There is no amount that you can just, if someone is offering you like a quick and easy, cheap lead generation, like you're going to get what you pay for. So do remember that. Like you got to do your groundwork, before you get into lead gen. I loved how you moved down the funnel that way. And, there is work involved. And with lead generation, you will always get what you pay for.
Absolutely. Well, you kind of stole my idea. I was going to talk about the funnel.
Yeah.
I was going to say to our listeners in B2B marketing, really think about, if you're looking to do lead generation, think about where in the funnel you need to influence. Do you actually need to bring more people into your funnel just at the awareness stage? If that's what you need to do, how about we look at a resource download, a white paper or an ebook? Mm-hmm. If you've got plenty of people in the funnel and you'd love them to be learning a little bit more, a webinar is a really good way to run that education. And then if you've got those people that are so close to closing but just aren't quite getting over the line, or you need to bring more people into that sort of phase of building that relationship, that's where a roundtable really works well.
Yeah.
That's my key takeaway for today.
Yep. No.
Fantastic. All right. Thanks, Christine.
Thank you, Laura.
All right, now it's time for our campaign of the week, where we highlight a campaign that really stood out and how it brought the ideas of B2B marketing to life. So for this episode, I've picked a campaign from Datascape, which has run across our title council. Now, this is a really strong example of what we've been talking about today. Not just lead generation, but how to really do it well in a B2B environment. And I think what's interesting here is, again, touching back on what we spoke about in the episode, they didn't start with lead generation. They really started with branding and awareness and building that position and trust within the audience. So how they did that was through a very targeted audience, obviously using council and using local government decision makers who are the readers of our magazine Council. And how they really built that awareness and education position was through a mix of premium print placements including inside front cover ads. They used high impact digital like website leaderboards. They used e-newsletter banners, and importantly, content that positioned them as experts in their space. So they weren't just showing up in the environment where they know that their target customers are hanging out and gathering their information. They were showing up in a really credible and consistent way. And this goes straight back to what we were talking about earlier. So really building that baseline of trust first, having that strong visibility, and that's the platform from which you can really run a strong lead generation campaign. So they also really spent the time to build that familiarity and authority. So by the time they actually got around to introducing a lead generation asset, the audience already knew who they were, knew what they did, and were really interested in what they had to say and what they had to offer in terms of an asset. So the asset itself that they were using for lead generation, it was a white paper, and it focused on council residents' attitudes to digitisation in local government, which is a pretty hot topic at the moment. And particularly what a lot of councils see is, I suppose, people, their constituents, residents are often dealing with other providers that are offering really strong digital experiences, and councils really need to be able to keep up. And that's a lot of what the white paper spoke to. It was really about helping councils understand what their residents were feeling like in terms of their experience with digital technology in that council environment. So like I said at the start, a really important thing about this was it wasn't promotional. It was insight-led. It was relevant. It was really valuable. And that's a really important key. We touched on it during the episode. You need to give the audience something that they actually want to hear and is actually going to be valuable for them. And then the results that we were able to generate for the campaign really spoke for themselves. So running through council, that highly trusted, highly targeted environment, they were actually able to generate significantly more leads than they had through a generic lead gen activity on platforms like LinkedIn. So we started our campaign on LinkedIn. We actually weren't able to successfully generate enough leads for the campaign. So what we did was shift it straight over to Council Magazine. And by running the campaign through Council, we were able to get hundreds of leads as opposed to the single digit figures that we were able to generate on LinkedIn. So I guess that really reinforces a point that we've been making in the episode. If you want quality leads, you really need the right audience. You need to be in the right environment where they're open to receiving the information that you have to share, and that strong brand presence leading into it. And as a result, the campaign that was delivered was a really great example of building credibility first, then activating the lead generation in a place where your audience is already engaged. And it's a great reminder, like we said in the episode as well, that lead generation doesn't work in isolation. It works best when it's built on strong foundations. And that's why this campaign really stood out to us this week. We thought it was the perfect campaign of the week to speak to after our episode on lead generation. And that's the perfect place for us to wrap up this episode. So if you enjoyed this episode, we'd love you to like and subscribe to the feed in your favorite podcast app, or you can like our YouTube channel. We'll be back in your ears next month, sharing more insights and campaigns from the world of B2B marketing. But for now, thanks for listening, and we'll see you soon.